and I'm very honored the head of Trust International. Pleased to invite you all, welcome you all to this roundtable, which we are doing in partnership with the University of Business Council, Amrika Sharma representing the US This is a second of a series of roundtable that we are doing. The first one we did was on 2nd October in partnership with another US India Partnership Forum. And I am pleased to welcome Isabella from the US University. Yadavendra Mathur, till 2 days ago was with the NITI Aayog as Special Secretary, and my friend and fellow board member, Dr. Avi Mairam, former Finance Secretary of India. What was interesting, which came out in the Washington Roundtable, and we have circulated a note on that particular thing, including an article which I and my colleague Prashant Sharma have written for the Asian Names has been published as a kind of a summary, is that we've had innovation collaboration with the US going back as early as 1961, when we never had a very friendly relation with the US, but we were part of the Soviet bloc, as it were, but not in it, but allied to it. The Green Revolution. Norman Borlaug, if you've all heard of his name, who brought that very famous wheat germ, and supported by Ford Foundation, they helped India to get into the Green Revolution, and we continue to remain a food surplus country today, thanks to that particular help provided by the US. Now, for India, innovation and entrepreneurship remain critical for increasing productivity, economic growth and development. On the other hand, the US interests lie in the market potential and talent pool that India can provide to its innovation-centric companies, which has actually been happening. Bilateral initiatives that encourage innovation to play a greater role in steering socio-economic development in the two countries do exist. Government-to-government initiatives such as the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum, the United States India Science and Technology Endowment Fund, and the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative, among others, are testimonies to this fact. At a recent one I was referring to, the Innovation Roundtable organized by CUTS in partnership with USIBC on 30th October, our Ambassador Harshvardhan Shringla underlined the significance of bilateral innovation cooperation to pursue win-win outcomes. What he said was interesting. India, a young country brimming with talent and future entrepreneurs, is the ideal destination for US expertise and capital. The US is also the repository of cutting-edge technology that is highly relevant to what India requires for its economic growth and development. Furthermore, developing an alliance between India and US on the digital and cyberspace issues is the need of the hour. If you look at the geopolitical situation. The core objectives, among others, should aim at fostering innovation, development, and defensive mechanisms, which includes a roadmap for artificial intelligence. The announcement by the Indian Space Research Organization introducing the Indian Regional Navigation Satellite System, NAVIC, provides an opportunity to leapfrog in the technology sector. This original navigation system really has the potential for improvements in geolocation capabilities of mobile, automotive, Internet of Things, and all of that requiring 5G. In addition to retaining its position as the world's third largest startup hub and the growing number of tech startups, India is strategically poised to drive the next wave in technological advancement. Supporting the increasing number of tech startups is cognizance of their role in providing direct and indirect jobs, including attracting foreign investments. Recent policy interventions have ensured that progress is made in this direction. However, there is still work to be done in terms of sending a strong signal that investors are welcome and to ensure that fiscal incentives are made more lucrative and in favor of startups while ensuring consistent supply of electricity and relatively skilled workforce. These are two very critical inputs. Also, for innovation-based transformation, the foremost requirement is not to underplay the role of institutions in policy innovations. The role of government is in fact central in that sense. The need for such kind of innovation makes more sense in the context of the defense offset policy 2016 of India. Due to complexity of regulations, the foreign suppliers and vendors fail to meet their offset obligations. This actually affects the intent and spirit envisaged in the first place. To arrest such gaps, it is imperative for policymakers to keep creating space for multi-pronged, multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder engagement. This will also require a whole of government approach, like many other similar issues that we've been speaking about. For example, whether it is tourism or skills, etc. These are cut across various ministries. And similarly, this also has to be looked at the defense offset policy as to how it can benefit the other parts of our efforts that we are doing as a country. In the energy sector, the US can help address both conventional and non-conventional energy needs of India. The areas of convergence can be joint research and development in clean coal technologies, natural gas, nuclear energy, and integrating renewable energy into the electricity grid. Since 2015, the Government of India has embarked on a journey of installing 175 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2022 in the country's energy mix. This is exceptionally challenging, given the current operational and regulatory challenges in the power sector. However, a study conducted under the US-India bilateral program, Greening the Grid, revealed in 2017 that integrating 175 gigawatts of renewable energy into India's electricity grid by 2022 is both technically and economically viable, provided there are policy and regulatory decisions that support system flexibility and renewable energy investment. Between the US and India should be settled without sacrificing our development interests. This is where there is a point of departure quite often. Understanding of IPRs, USS versus what we think about in India. Some IPRs may be perceived as public goods, but others may not. It will also require India to build awareness on IPR and innovation issues in the industry, particularly startups. From a standpoint that patents are crucial in bridging innovation gaps, the patenting process in India needs to be expedited from the current period of 64 months to at least 30 months as against 24 months in the US. Our patenting process time is more than 5 years, which is pretty bad as against 2 years even in the United States. Seemingly, the US may provide great help in addressing socio-economic issues facing India. Like I refer to the Green Revolution, that is a marvelous partnership of the past. The US government and private sector holding tremendous potential in mobilizing capital, technical skilling and knowledge support for the country. We have a lot of private sector companies around the table, and I'm sure they will be speaking about it in the panel which is going to follow. Going further, there is a need to build on innovation cooperation in energy and environment, information and communications technology, emerging technologies and digital infrastructure, entrepreneurship and inclusive growth, infrastructure in manufacturing, and healthcare, among others. The roundtables such as this are an attempt to enhance mutual understanding about the role of innovation in accelerating growth and development in the major and strategic sectors, as well as the pain points towards their uptake from policy and regulatory perspectives. The sectors in focus of this roundtable include, but are not limited to, defense and aerospace, energy, and data and technology. I would like to thank USIBC for collaborating with us for this roundtable. I also thank all the speakers in the panel and the panel which is going to follow from this, and all the participants for taking time out from their busy schedules for joining with us today. And with that, let me welcome you all once again and to request Ambika to make her opening remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Let me first thank you for giving us an opportunity to be your partners in today's conference, and thanks for Uday for motivating us to come forward. You have already alluded to many important areas which I'm going to focus in my opening remarks. From the global organizations to the embassies to the various international and bilateral chambers like ours, we have been closely watching the contours of the US-India relationship over the last 20 years and see how the diplomatic and economic landscape is changing. United States and India are not only the strategic partners with hugely enhanced trade and commercial interaction, but are expected to gain and have been gaining in exploring the new business opportunities in many strategic areas. Our cooperation and exchange in the foreign policy, strategic and defense issues are an important factor in the evolving geopolitical order in Asia and the Indo-Pacific, which the entire world is watching. When, in fact, the senior leaders from the CUTS, I would like to again name Uday, approached us to be the partners in this exercise, we realize the importance of innovation as a subject and a center stone to all the conversations we are having with regards to the India-US story. Today, with the presence of some very key senior leaders from the many sectors which Mr. Mehta has already spoken, I'm sure we are going to carve out a good strategy as to, and also the areas which are, as per Mr. Mehta, which are the pain points. According to the USIBC, we would like to prioritize our 5 pillars to the India-US innovation stories. And the first one I would like to talk about is data and digital economy. You will all agree that as we evolve and enter the 4th industrial revolution, data-driven economy for the future, comprising Internet of Things, you already talked about, blockchain and AI, and multiple cloud are going to be the key factors defining the relationship. The future, hence, of Indo-US innovation relationship will actually depend on the free flow of ideas and data. As India work towards its data law on the privacy, USIBC hopes that it will adopt a collaborative approach to growth to maximize the benefits. Now, I'll come to the second sector, which is education. With educational deficiencies threatening to undermine its prospects in the global innovation economy, we strongly propose that India must deregulate the higher education system, and from the US-India point of view, we must work towards setting up the platform that allow training of programs jointly administered like colleges, universities that are not only mutually recognized in both countries, but also serve as the global platforms. The third sector, which has already been very well spoken by Mr. Mehta, is energy and environment, and I'm sure with the Isabella around the table, this will definitely get a focused attention. US and India would benefit from stronger partnership in the development of more efficient and cleaner energy technologies based on the scientific talents, entrepreneurial skills, and private sector experiences. In the UNIP report, we saw that came last week that both countries continue with the biggest worldwide greenhouse gas emitters. The energy infrastructure deficit India confronts is immense, and hence it's a test bed for scaling up cutting-edge renewable energy technologies that can be sequentially deployed in the respective countries. The fourth very key area, which has already been alluded to, is the area of life sciences and healthcare. India today, as we all know, is called the dispensary of the world and one of the fastest growing segments of the Indian economy. American and Indian firms are increasingly teaming up to discover innovate, and develop new chemical entities while sharing cost and risks. There is need to synergize the needs of both sides, keeping in mind the needs of the US pharma and medical device companies, which needs IP protection, innovation, and of course, we are very keenly looking towards the finalization of the monetary bill. How are we going to tackle the price control issue, which has been taken up by the respective sides? Fourth sector is defense and aerospace, where I would just like to state, after a very well explanation given by Mr. Pradeep Mehta, that with India being made as a major defense partner and with the launch of DTTI, it is of great importance for us to focus on by regularly looking at co-creation and co-production of strategic defense platforms. Of course, space has been talked about, cybersecurity has been talked about. They could really lay a good foundation of our future innovation partnerships. I would just like to conclude by saying that while both the nations are the crossroads when it comes to the strategic partnership, innovation will play a very key role in the days to come. And I'm sure in the panel, which has been very well put up following this opening session, is going to detail the opportunities and also bring forward some of the key policy and regulatory issues which needs the attention of both the governments. Thank you very much, Mr. Mehta, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mehta and Ambika, for that really excellent scene setting. I'm delighted to be participating in this important roundtable hosted by CUTS and USIBC. I'm privileged to be sitting among such a distinguished group of experts and actual practitioners of innovation. As a diplomat of almost 30 years, I'm hardly a practicing innovator in the traditional sense, and I'm realistic about my own abilities. But I have worked in a number of countries with varying innovation landscapes, as innovation has become an increasingly important part of the economic and diplomatic portfolio. As I'm sure you're aware, innovation in one sector can inspire innovations in other sectors, leading to a virtuous cycle of new products and services and the creation of new jobs. This innovation cycle begins with partnership and collaboration. This cycle has been an abiding strength of the U.S. economy and continues to drive it forward. Before I discuss a little bit about innovation in the United States, I'd like to take a moment to highlight a few aspects of the budding U.S. and India bilateral relationship. We've come a long way since the 1990s. You went even further back. And it has evolved into a strong and strategic partnership, one fit for the 21st century. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi have met numerous times over the past few years. They've developed a close personal relationship, as demonstrated by the successful Howdy Modi event in Houston. The U.S.-India partnership now involves almost every part of human activity, from economics, geopolitics, and energy, to scientific research, space, and beyond. The U.S. is India's largest export market, and U.S. companies are the largest source of foreign direct investment into India. Indian students and researchers enrich and are enriched in our universities. While the U.S. is not alone in being a leader in innovation, few countries have placed such a premium on innovation technological advancement. And after all, I'm here to represent the United States, so I'll focus on my home country and some of the elements that may be common and helpful to other countries. There are many elements that help the U.S. become a model of innovation. Our First Amendment is the top of the list. The free speech that this amendment protects enables a robust exchange of opinions and fresh thinking, and with them, new business ideas. Challenging the status quo is a bedrock of American dynamism. In the United States, success born of risk-taking and innovation is handsomely rewarded, and failure is viewed properly as a tool for learning. Consider Thomas Edison, who said of repeated setbacks in his quest to invent a practical light bulb, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." We know instinctively that failures often provide more lessons than successes. The United States is a nation of immigrants who have come together from all corners of the globe. Immigrating to the United States to create a better life is a mindset that encourages our best and brightest, regardless of their backgrounds or birthrights, to rise to the top. The diverse histories and experiences immigrants bring with them to our shores contribute new perspectives and great ideas. Our education system values exploration and outside-the-box thinking. We teach students to challenge the status quo. We embed innovation into the earliest stages of our education system. U.S. students are encouraged to ask not only why, but why not? Last year, approximately 200,000 Indian students chose to study in the United States. Freedom to dream, to act, and to think has brought about cures for diseases, aid to the disabled and elderly, and the widespread availability of necessities that once were luxuries. Innovation is also tied to entrepreneurship, for which the United States provides a conducive environment. One can come up with a brilliant idea, yet fail to bring it to market or scale it up if the cost of doing business is onerous or government regulations are overly stringent. American public policies have traditionally favored entrepreneurship, small businesses, and startups. Taxes on capital gains and higher incomes are relatively low compared with other countries, and regulations have generally been light. I want to recognize that there are other countries, I'm not sure if anybody from Sweden is here, that do not share our tax policies and which do excel in innovation. But we think our model has done quite well for us and the many innovators and entrepreneurs who have decided to make the United States their home. Henry Ford created the assembly line that made the automobile affordable to most Americans. Dr. Jonas Salk created a vaccine for polio, the plague of the early 20th century. And Bill Gates created the operating system which helped make computers available to more and more people around the world. As you know, two of the most innovative American companies, Microsoft and Google, are led by Indian Americans. And immigrants always have and will continue to propel innovation in the United States. All of these innovators were able to succeed not just because they came up with a better mousetrap, but also because the mousetrap they were selling was located in a risk-taking and entrepreneurship-friendly house. There are other important elements that time will not allow me to explore fully. Strong intellectual property rights, free flow of data and information, and a policy of free access to government data. For example, the decision to make GPS data publicly available, which was very controversial at the time, has led to the growth of entire industries. We recognize the fact that every nation is different based on their histories, cultures, and civilizations. However, we believe our experience building an innovative economy in the United States could be useful for other nations seeking to create similar or different innovative and creative environments. As mentioned previously, innovation today is also fueled by partnership and collaboration, especially as we live in a globalized world where ideas, labor, and value chains crisscross international boundaries. We recognize that India has its own vibrant innovation history, and the government has a rich variety of programs and incentives for innovation. But my task here is simply to talk about where the United States and Indian innovative journeys intersect. While I do not mean to downplay the paramount part played by private investment, I'm going to confine myself to programs in my area of responsibility, which are principally those that are supported by the U.S. government, and hope the private sector will speak about how important their contribution is. I'll turn to some of those programs that we are undertaking with Indian partners. The Indo-U.S. Science and Technology Forum was created in the year 2000 as one of several mechanisms to foster science and technology cooperation between our countries. The forum has allowed our science and technology partnership to mature and flourish across our public and private sectors. Its objectives corresponded well with the 2017 Global Entrepreneur Summit in Hyderabad. At that event, Prime Minister Modi and White House Senior Advisor Ivanka Trump joined thousands of entrepreneurs in celebrating the innovative zeal of young people from India and the United States, as well as other countries, and especially women. Capitalizing on its initial work, the forum has expanded its mandate to manage additional funding sources in order to advance collaborative innovation between Indian and U.S. scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and students. For example, We promote joint development and commercialization of innovation technology for social impact through the U.S.-India Science and Technology Endowment Fund. In one project, Stanford University engineers partners with Rajasthan's Jaipur Foot Organization to create a prosthetic knee that costs less than $100. This knee has helped over 700 people in 28 countries achieve mobility. The Pacesetter Fund is helping India meet its growing energy needs and improve access to electricity in remote parts of the country by financing renewable energy innovation in India. The U.S. government created Nexus, a startup incubator, to support Indian startups and help strengthen the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem. As a vibrant Indian startup sector helps U.S. businesses and the U.S. economy. The Millennium Alliance, run by USAID, is an innovation incubator and investment organization which has leveraged an initial $7 million investment from the U.S. government in 2012 to $25 million in 2018, supporting more than 150 promising innovators in India. The Millennium Alliance is opening up opportunities to leverage finance and technology in new ways, using the best of these innovations to boost equitable and sustainable development, reaching the poorest communities and encouraging more active participation from women. USAID and the government of India collaborate with a variety of private sectors to leverage resources to scale up solutions for national and global impact. The partners include U.S. and Indian companies, family foundations, impact investors, educational institutions, think tanks, diaspora groups, and the list goes on. Almost 4 million Indian Americans live in the United States, and their commitment to both the United States and their country of ancestry suggests that diaspora engagement will undoubtedly extend and endure. In the energy sector, our nations pull together our expertise to study areas of mutual interest. For example, the U.S. Geological Survey and India's Directorate General of Hydrocarbons jointly study gas hydrates. The U.S. Department of Energy and State, Departments of Energy and State, along with our USAID colleagues, work with Indian partners to identify how nations can best integrate renewable energy into our national grids. We're also doing a lot of additional work in the coal area. This energy cooperation extends into other fields, and in particular, it involves the private sector. General Electric's Welch Technology Center in Bangalore, ExxonMobil's Technology Center in the same city, and DuPont's Innovation Center in Gurgaon are examples of U.S. firms that conduct innovative research here in India. We're working together on clean energy technology development through the U.S.-India Joint Clean Energy Research and Development Centers. As a key implementing organization of the $100 million partnership between the U.S. Department of Energy and India's Department of Science and Technology, the forum enables our countries to collaborate and enhance our collective knowledge of solar energy, new biofuels, energy efficient buildings, smart grids, and energy storage. In the health area, in 2015, India released its first indigenous vaccine, a vaccine against rotavirus called Rotavac. The Rotavac vaccine story began more than 3 decades ago in India, when researchers discovered an unusual strain of rotavirus that infected newborns without making them sick. Joint U.S.-India research teams working under the bilateral Indo-U.S. Vaccine Action Program conducted critical early-stage research to develop the vaccine candidate. And I would note in my work with the endowment fund that healthcare innovations is one of the most fertile areas. It almost threatens to overtake the fund because there's so many good ideas. Science envoys from the United States are also partnering with U.S. Indian counterparts to tackle poor air quality and make further progress on commercial space programs. Turning to defense technology, it's an important area where U.S. and India cooperate in co-developing and co-producing technologies. Research laboratories from our military services and India's Defense Research and Development Organization routinely share information on future technologies that directly impact the effectiveness and security of our country's militaries. Our latest collaborations have focused on minimizing blast and blunt trauma for soldiers in the field to capitalizing on the latest developments in the area of photonics. The Defense Technology and Trade Initiative, or DTTI, started in 2012, is another area of cooperation where our defense establishment and industry are matching security requirements with material solutions. In late October of this year, individuals from both governments interfaced with industry colleagues to discuss cooperative efforts in reinforcing the global supply chain for defense articles. U.S. representatives also met with a handful of Indian startup companies to better understand some of the amazing work being done here. There is much more that the United States and India can do together, whether it be in the fields of supercomputers, artificial intelligence, energy, or defense cooperation. We can and must inspire our nation's youth to ask why and why not. Our scientists and engineers can serve as role models and mentors for women and others from disadvantaged communities. These are realistic and achievable goals for a partnership between two vibrant and diverse democracies. Governments can play a vital role in creating the ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship by establishing simple, transparent rules and processes to allow innovators to quickly bring their products to market. The potential for mutual benefit through our cooperation is huge. I believe it was Victor Hugo who said, "Nothing's more powerful than an idea whose time has come. No problem is insurmountable if our nations are closely working together to tackle it." Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to step in for Mr. Ram, the NITI, the National Institution for Transforming India, NITI stands for that. Many people sometimes miss it. So it's not about policy. NITI for us Indians, we know it means policy, but NITI is more than that. It is a transformation which again begs an answer: how is change different from transformation? So having said that, one of the mandates given, in fact, the only budget that the national institution gets from the government of India, apart from its think tank role, is to implement a program called the Atal Innovation Mission. That is what the mission director would have spoken. It's about setting up the entire innovation ecosystem through a two-pronged approach. One is to tackle the schools, to bring down the innovation mindset and culture in the schools of India. So through a transparent process, we have been able to identify about 7,000 schools. These are typically class 10th and 12th. Typically class 10th, any public, private, any school in India can apply. And we release a sum which is in rupees, it's 10 lakh rupees initially, and then 2 lakh rupees over the next 5 years to each school. So more than 7,000 schools in India have got this kitty, under which they have bought a whole toolkit to set up a tinkering lab. So I'm very happy to share that an ecosystem has been built, and these 7,000 schools in which children in classes 9th and 10th can, this is not a part of their curriculum. So they have a robotic kit, a 3D printer, a whole toolkit in that laboratory, which they can buy, and it's fully funded by Niti Aayog. And I would encourage any of you to kind of visit some of these 7,000 schools, and the kind of solutions these children in classes 9th and 10th are able to think through, and exactly what Isabella said about why and why not, and how can I use a robotic kit, how can I use a 3D printer. So that, and we plan to set up these tinkering labs in at least 50,000 schools in India. It's going to take another 4 years, but the ambition is to reach out to at least 50,000 schools in India with the tinkering laboratory, tinkering lab. And as we speak, there are 7,000 of these schools in India where these children are spending about 3 to 4 hours every week with a trained teacher who is encouraging that group in classes 9th and 10th to use the toolkit, the equipment. So many of us may not have seen a 3D printer. Many of us wouldn't have maybe used a 3D printer. But these kids have hands-on to a small 3D printer and a robotic kit. They're actually using the printed circuit boards. There is a coaching system. We have over 200 mentors, and these 200 mentors are helping these 7,000 schools through an online system. And these mentors, I invite any of you, you can go online and register as a mentor and then get connected to any school of your choice and see if you can kind of guide them. So these are practical low-end solutions that these children are able to think through. As a second tier of operations, the Niti Aayog has identified about 200 incubators. And to these incubators, so we have already set up, released the grants. So this is 10 crores of rupees. 10 crores of rupees is given to each incubator. And the incubator, that institution, it could be a university, it could be a company with an arm's length entity. So there are criteria, there's a high-powered committee, and it's a transparent process. So again, we get thousands of applications and then we are able to select. So over a period of time, over the last 3 years, we have been able to release monies to about 100 incubators. And she just now mentioned the GES, when Ivanka Trump was there along with Prime Minister Modi to Hyderabad. So I was also a part of that organizing team. And that is when and we were able to show to Ivanka some of these initiatives. Even she was, Putin, lots. I think for our Prime Minister, this is one of the high points. He makes it a point to share with the other global leaders how India is creating a whole new generation of young kids who would then later on go on to IITs and other, because they're getting trained. So the ecosystem for innovation is at the school level, is the point I wanted to make. So 40 of these incubators are up and running. Some of the earliest incubator in India funded by Niti Aayog was at Banasthali Vidyapeeth. So I don't know if Pradeep ji has had a chance to visit. So the best incubator is, and so Niti Aayog gave them 10 crores of rupees, and Banasthali put another 10 crores from their side, and they have one of the best incubators. Of course, it's an all-women university, but amazing, energy is created. So 200 incubators would be, this is over and above the incubators. Yeah, so results could be, so Vanasthali, I'm told, has got about 40 companies which are being incubated with them, startups. And I think 4 or 5 of them have got their angel funding and their Series A. So as you know, the entire ecosystem for startups in these challenging times is there. So maybe 1 in 100 startup would kind of become a unicorn, but you would need that. So the success rate for startups is definitely going to be very, very low. So I think incubators should not be disheartened, if I may say. So that ecosystem we have prepared. So just to repeat, we're trying to work with the schools through Niti Aayog. Then we're trying to support the incubators. So 200 incubators would be there. This is big money because we're giving 10 crores to each, which is a little more than about $1.3 million per incubator. So we're going to be spending some money, and this is over and above what the Department of Science and Technology and various ministries, they all have budgets for incubators. And then the next level which we need is accelerators. So again, I'm happy to say that we are working with a lot of high-tech companies, let's say Rolls-Royce and other, GE. So many of these global companies are looking at supporting accelerators. So the tinkering labs in the schools, the incubation centers, and then the accelerators. And that's when the industry partnership is really strengthened. So it cannot be like a one-off overnight. You got to create the whole ecosystem. And I think the national artificial intelligence strategy was mandated to be written by Niti Aayog. So 2 years ago, the finance minister in the budget announced, and so Niti last year wrote the national AI strategy. I'm sure some of you may have had a look at it. If you haven't, have a look at it. It's one of the better documents around the world on how a national, because this is AI for all, very, very clear. We're trying to bring center stage the need for AI to solve problems in health, agriculture. So these are 2 core areas for the national AI strategy, health and agriculture. So so the opportunity for the AI ecosystem in India is to connect with people who can generate the data. And like you were rightly saying, data-rich India needs a very progressive data protection law. And I think that law is still in its final stages, still not in a way out. But I can assure that the opportunities around partnerships with US companies and Indian companies is immense. And like the great work done by this council, as well as other business councils, to connect at the policy level, US and India policy makers is there. But we are all aware that there is need for data protection and localization. There is a need, but that doesn't take away the global good, the global public good that India is committed to create. And I think that's the lesson we want to share, that the way the Aadhaar in India was created as a public good. Very few countries, in fact, there's none in the world which has got that kind of a base which is a public good.
Kenya is not.
Now, Kenya may be copying us, and we'd be happy to share this public good template. So it cannot be housed in a private enterprise ever. Even the National Payment Corporation of India, where you can, so fintech. So I think that the emerging power of the Indian ecosystem is based on a clear recognition on what is a private good and what's a public good. So I think we are very clear that a lot of data has to be as a public good. So I think the concerns around India as being protectionist and all is kind of garbled, because we are very clear that we do not want good quality, high quality data to be shifting away from a public good to a from a public good to a private good. Though there may be some efficiency gains in it being a private good, but as a public good, I think the long-term gains are there. So having said that, I would stop. If there are any questions on the role of the Atal Innovation Mission, I could take them. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I think the stage has already been set in the inaugural, and I would only like to say, raise a few concerns which perhaps then can come up in the discussions that we're going to have. One issue in the field of innovation always is in terms of how to deal with the overhang of the earlier investments that have been done, for instance, in the energy sector. We have close to 2.5 lakh crores, which is invested in generation of energy through thermal, for instance. We are moving very quickly into clean energy. We have built up a very huge capacity for generating both solar and wind power. But we are also seeing that there is an overhang now on the financial system with the sunk capital which is already sitting there, and we have not been able to address that issue. So while we are talking of innovation, I don't think we can look at it in isolation from the realities on the ground, which is going to be true for many sectors, especially as technology changes very quickly. Same thing is in terms of, for instance, the sunk cost in refineries. The huge investment which has gone into oil refineries, what is going to be the next fate of these? Because their life is 30 to 40 to 50 years. What is going to be the fate of it if the entire transportation sector in India becomes electrical? So we need to be mindful of that. And I think while we are looking at innovation, we need to also begin to look at how we are going to deal with this problem, which is a real problem as far as the economy is concerned. And that's a matter of great concern that we need to be looking at. The second issue which I think we need to also deliberate upon is the issue of especially when we were talking about joint collaboration in innovation, or when US companies and Indian companies are working on various innovation projects. One question which always comes up is the political overhang on it. We have seen, for instance, in case of dual use technologies, where in many cases United States has put a lot of restrictions on transfer of technologies which are of dual use nature. We have also seen this in the nuclear field, where there has been a major raging debate which hasn't been settled as yet with regard to the technology of peaceful use of nuclear power. This continues. So I think we need to look at the political part of it also, because political fortunes keep changing in terms of relationships. And when we are talking of technology link-up, so we are talking of integration of a whole value chain of developing new technologies or innovations, we need to see how we are going to ring-fence them to protect them, because these are a very long-term relationship. The third issue, which I think also is very important, and we need to answer that question, is which Yadu had raised in a different context about public good and private good, is especially because of the issue of the IPR in pharmaceutical sector, which has been a huge concern to the US companies and also to the US lawmakers, because I had the occasion of myself being part of a very small delegation which had gone and met the US caucus in the India caucus in the US Senate. And the first and major concern for them was about the manner in which the IPR is being dealt with in India. Now, the question before us is that if you have seen yourself, for instance, in the case of generic medicines, even Gates Foundation or Bill Clinton Foundation have been using Indian generic drugs in Africa because of the cost. And if we have a huge population of 1.2 billion and growing in India, the cost of providing medicine or healthcare to them will always be paramount. So therefore, how do you reconcile these two questions of protecting the IPR in the manner in which the US companies would want it to be protected, and protecting the public interest in terms of providing medicines also to people who are yet not even who have not even transcended the poverty line as yet, and that's a huge number, close to 300 million people. So I think I am just putting these up as an opening remark for the discussion, not to lose sight of these realities while being exuberant about the part of innovation, which we ought to be, because it's important. But it needs to be tempered with the reality that we will keep confronting again and again, even if we don't discuss it. Thank you.
So I think when we are looking at the US and India partnerships in this context, in terms of innovation, in the US, while the innovation ecosystem has been around for a long time, the fact is that in India also there have been different type of innovations at different points of time, whether it was zero or others, typically as a public good, not so much as private good perhaps in those days. However, in the current scenario, the fact is that India is also recognizing that there is a value for intellectual property rights, and that's how the legislation, etc., have been evolving over the years and decades, and especially after the 2005 amendment of the Patent Act, and then of course we had the Copyright Amendment Act, and right now also there's something in the Parliament on related to that. But when we are looking at the opportunities and partnerships, especially I would want to focus on the ICT sector and data economy in that sense. Now, in India, we have been, I'll say, even if perhaps unintentionally, perhaps the biggest beneficiary of the cross-border data flows, because way back in 1968 itself, when TCS started the IT industry in India, the data was coming from US to India, it was being processed and it was going back there. And which is something that today we have a $140 billion plus dollar industry. I mean, just in 1989, the total IT industry, and when I'm saying total IT industry, including the hardware, and which was, by the way, was a bigger part at that point of time, in 1989, 30 years back, was just 1,000 crore rupees at that point of time. So even if you take in terms of whatever the exchange rate at that point of time, it was just a few $1 million. And that's again something which has actually grown to 142 billion or so right now. It is India's largest export, exceeding the textile, exceeding the gems and jewelry and many other things. So I think that role is very important in this industry. For almost all the US headquartered companies, India is the second largest base globally, and in some cases it might as well be within the next 5 years perhaps the largest base in terms of number of people, exceeding even the home bases or their headquarters themselves. That's also true for the company that I work for. So every fourth employee of Symantec based in India, every sixth employee actually is based in Pune globally. And our largest security operations center was in Chennai, representing approximately 40% capacity, although we had 7 of them globally. Now, when we come to data stuff, I think broadly we need to look at 3 broad categories of data. There will be some data which is obviously, which can be and should be sent across anywhere unfettered. So for example, the moment we say data as a public good, I think that itself shows that not only data as public good only in India, but also perhaps in US or elsewhere, and likewise perhaps the data in the US which is publicly available, whether as data.gov or any other website, is also accessible and available for anybody around the world for usage. So I think that's one area. Second is obviously there will be some very strategic data which people would like to sort of keep under a different control within the country, and not just within the country, perhaps much better controls in terms of how the governments and others are looking at that, which is typically in terms of data classification, we'll say for highly confidential or something like that. Then there'll be a whole lot of other data which is in between. And for that data, you should allow that data also to be traveling anywhere, as long as you have the suitable controls which go and are associated with that type of data transfer. The second thing is, when we are looking at these areas, the fact is with increasing hyperconnectivity, with ubiquitous connectivity that we have today, and also the devices which are operating and are connected to the internet without any human intervention. So whether it is a sensor, whether it is any other thing, there are many things which do not require any manual continuous operation by a human being. And in that scenario, a lot of data is being generated, being collated. And for this data to be actually meaningful, for example, whether it is a weather data, whether it is a transportation data, you do need big platforms to analyze that type of data so that meaningful inferences and insights can be culled out from that. So whether we had this in 2004, the tsunami. Now for that tsunami, if we had enough data, perhaps people would have got much better warning much faster, and less loss of life and property would have accrued on account of that. Very specifically in terms of cybersecurity, yes, the threats are growing, and in fact, as per our analysis, as per many other analyses, both US and India lead both in terms of being the biggest target. So for example, US was the biggest target when it came to targeted attack groups. India was number 2 for past 3 years. Even in terms of source, there's a lot of activity both in the US as well as in India. Of course, we are not the leading sources that way globally. But just because we have big sizes in terms of users, both in India and the US, there's likely that there will be some rogue elements in these countries also, apart from, of course, many others. But even in that area, there are 3 specific areas that we need to focus on. One is there's a cooperation between at the strategic level in terms of a geopolitical level, and what type of threat intelligence can be shared across the countries, especially in terms of defense and other strategic sectors. The second is in terms of critical information infrastructure protection, whether it is a banking, whether it is telecom, whether it is a healthcare or anything like that. 2.5 years back, we had a big attack of ransomware, which had a big impact in the UK's National Health Service. But that same thing also had an impact in the GNPT in India. That's already known, well documented instances. So if we do not know, for example, if there's a particular bank in Pune which is facing a particular problem, similar type of attack could be happening at a bank in Minnesota. Now, if we do not share that type of information, we are actually missing out these type of opportunities, because the bad guys do have that they are sharing the information anyway, and if the good guys don't share, there's a problem. And the last thing that I want to say in terms of data sharing, our Rashtra Kavi, the late Ramdhari Dinkar, so he had written a poem, very short poem called Pakshi or Badal, which basically said that the birds of one country do travel across the borders, and same way the water from one country becomes vaporized, it goes to another country, it becomes cumulus clouds, and it rains there. And I think that's something that we have also been seeing, as I said earlier, right in the beginning, that data was coming from the US, we were processing, sending it back in a different form, doing some value addition. We also got benefit, they also got benefit of that. Same way, a lot of other things where US companies are providing services in India, and I think this is a collaboration that we should continue. Thank you.
Well, at the outset, I'd like to thank CUTS and USIBC, for again organizing a seminar on this very important topic. And it's not probably more relevant, but it could get more relevant as time goes by, as innovation being the key word here. With regard to the military-industrial ecosystem, which is being sort of being garnered and fostered in the country ever since the 2012 DDTI initiative, a whole lot of steps have been taken both by the Indian industry under the aegis of the Indian government and the US government to come together and try and create a whole better and pragmatic approach towards fostering the entire defense aerospace sector. Now, for the longest time, I would like to bring out that the Indian military system was probably, in 3 words, strategy without management. What actually happened was, getting into any sort of big sort of military industrial buy was a knee-jerk reaction in trying to come up with the capability to answer to a particular threat. For the longest time, it was all the threats were in the land sector, and they were, initially also abled by superior tactical air power. But 2000 onwards, we saw the shift to recognizing our threats from the maritime domain as well. And with the 2002 effective blockading of Pakistan by Indian Navy, followed by the 26/11 attacks in Mumbai, the India's importance in this geopolitical region, in the Indian subcontinent, as well as all the regional players who make up the entire Indian Ocean region, has never been more important. And as India's importance grows, there is also going to be a renewed focus on India's capability of being a major security player. And for that, you require a very vibrant, a very robust military-industrial complex. Now, unfortunately, this cannot be recognized if, innovation is not at the heart of what we are trying to do. I have a lot of statistics here, and it says that India overtook the United Kingdom as the 5th largest defense spender in the world at about US $52.5 billion, up from US $51 billion. Now, despite this, our defense budget being about 1.6% of the entire GDP, as well as trying to stay within the 2% GDP self-imposed limit, we still are the world's largest importer. In fact, China, which is at about 4.7, is about less than 3/4 of what we are spending right now in just getting technology across from other countries. With that being said, innovation has probably never been at the heart of the entire defense procurement procedure. We are not, acquisition true in the sense, but more of procurement. When you actually talk about acquisition, it involves R&D, it involves creating industry, it involves creating logistics, supply chain, and it involves creating a maintenance hub. Towards that, the Indian MOD, as well as the Ministry of Finance and all the other Departments of Science and Technology, have been very, I would say, forthcoming in creating the entire IDEX, the Innovation for Defense Excellence, through the Defense Innovation Fund, and also setting up the Defense Technology Fund. However, for that to get off, by just investing an initial small amount of 100 crores probably seems a very little amount to try and encourage effective investment even by the bigger foreign OEMs into this. Primarily because IDDM, as has been conceptualized in the defense procurement procedure, still entails foreign OEMs to depend on their global supply chain. The whole idea of an IDDM would be to shift the supply chain into India. for that to happen without innovation being a key factor in driving these industries to set up this kind of ecosystem in India would be very difficult. So I would say it would be beneficial for both the US and India to spend more time together under the DTTI to try and get these technologies, basic technologies, into India through the DTTI route, or even if you call the IDDM or the strategic partnership model, that would be more effective in the long run.
I have to start by thanking Mr. Mehta for writing to me to come here and speak. I would like to touch on the defense as well as the data and security part, and a little bit on the education. Both the initial areas, defense and data, are where I have worked, I still work. And education, of course, coming from a very remote part of Assam, I still see the opportunity to build up a policy that can really nurture talents and make them possibly contributing much to all of the innovation ecosystems, rather than just becoming graduates who become unemployable at the end of the day. It's very interesting to hear Mr. Gandhi also touch on some of the aspects around the whole defense procurement system. But if we look at how this whole relationship between India and US has been evolving on defense, DTTI is relatively new compared to when the acquisitions actually started from the US about a decade back. And some of these acquisitions, or rather majority of these acquisitions, are still FMS based, the foreign military sales of the US based. We experimented a lot with our defense procurement policies. Many iterations have happened. Pratish mentioned about the IDDM, but before IDDM, efforts were made to get into developing the defense ecosystem in the country at a few tier levels, even through the MAKE program way back in 2007. Unfortunately, today is 2019, not a single MAKE program has taken off. And what did the MAKE program entail? MAKE program entailed that the whole of the development would happen in the country. Of course, you could take the help of global OEMs or specific partners in the areas. Now, I followed 3 programs very closely which came under the MAKE route, because I headed an American defense company in India called General Dynamics. And in almost 3 of the programs, they had their pie. The Future Infantry Combat Vehicle, possibly it would have been a program that took in more than 7,000 to 8,000 different companies of different sizes, which could have built up the whole ecosystem, right from a bolt to the armored vehicle that moves out in the field. Twice you went through the process of enlisting, entities and companies to participate. After heaps of responses and all, suddenly everything goes silent. Now, in that whole of that submission that an Indian prime has done with the support of many US as well as other foreign OEMs, and of course smaller partners in the ecosystem within the country, that whole effort over a period of time gets lost. So 2009 to 2019, twice you had a process of submission. The last came, I think, in 2016, and then till 2019 there is blank. There is nothing that comes on. The question is that what happens to their tier 3, tier 2, tier 4 individuals or entities that invested to do a little bit of innovation that could have gone into that whole large armored vehicle. So one of the first lessons that we need to take when we are talking about this cooperation and trying to ensure if we have the capacity to take in what a US OEM could offer is that what is the sustenance for these tier 2, tier 3 or that MSME that we are trying to throw some lofty proposals, but at the end of the day we don't support it because the program never takes off. So I think we need to really seriously think about that if we are putting some programs in the long-term perspective plan of the MOD and then in that 15-year whatever LTTP it's called, and then you take it down to an actual acquisition around the 5 2-year cycle. In that, where are you actually continuing seriously and concluding a particular program? FMS sales do not add really to the capacity building within the country. It could help. It possibly today is being looked at by some of the OEMs, but that is not a part of an agreement that you are signing that an OEM has to do that. Offsets is a different story, but actual capacity building is not happening. If an actual capacity building focus happens, then some level of innovation will happen. So I think one of the first points that at a macro level that we need to take is we need to conclude a program to its logical end if we have taken a call to do it. And that's where I agree with Mr. Gandhi when he says that it is more of a procurement than acquisition. Because at the end of the day, if you take the whole desktop in front of you and you see a whole national security picture and you are trying to fill up all the different services, different programs and acquisitions and everything, but delays and then, staying away from decisions is always skewing up that whole picture. And at the end of the day, in some areas you are seeing you are moving, in other areas you are not moving. So at a macro level, first we need to correct this, that if we are with a program where we are thinking that we have defined a procurement process which we refine after every 2 years, but we can't conclude even one program which we think would have got our whole ecosystem about 6,000 to 7,000 OEMs primarily around MSMEs in place. Number two, there are many forward-looking technology areas that gets into the whole defense equipment space today. Now, well, artificial intelligence has been mentioned. Even the MOD is thinking very closely about what gets into the, or what artificial intelligence gets into also the equipping part. We have definitely a good talent pool. But is there any way that we are already thinking of trying to bridge some of the gaps? Let me take one area. The communications. The overall digital communication, a secure digital communication ecosystem in the country. Army relies still on 1970s Plan RN program. A tactical communication system program was initially called TCS 2000. Till date it has not taken off. We tinkered twice or thrice with what should be the procurement mode. But till date, after a decision was taken, you went forward again, you stopped. When it came to implementing and giving money to the two entities that is selected to make a prototype, you suddenly again start negotiating and you don't move forward. Now, technology is not waiting. If you planned something in 2000 to improve your digital communication network, and we know how every military technology focus on communication is going day by day ahead. The software-defined radios, one of the key components of that. Except one of the services, two other services are just talking for years now. So these are areas where actually we really pick up a lot from the US. We, within our own ecosystems, get some niche entities that can pick up this. And mind you, we have all the foundational, except BECA, that's also going to be signed, all the other foundational agreements that the Americans want us to sign, we have already signed. They have made all the, I would say, changes related to India. Our concerns have been factored in when COMCASA and everything was signed. So now within that ambit, if we are able to incubate and get a few islands of expertise that can foster that, technological communication also, I would think we can again bring in a lot of innovation on innovators working on the ground, because we haven't faltered whenever anyone has been used us for different aspects of the products. 5G is a technology that everyone is talking about. The concerns on security are almost there. 4G LTE was something that the military was looking at for quite some time. Now it's almost a leap to 5G that we are talking, where again, security, cyber security concerns are coming. And I think this is a wonderful area to work between the two countries, because even at the Secretary of State and our External Affairs Minister, this conversation has already happened about where 5G could be something that we could talk. Deepakji touched a lot on the data part. Now, he and me, we have been watching the India's internet system evolve right from the day internet came to India. I still remember the first meeting where we had sat with Pramod Mahajan as a minister. It's a great journey. It's a wonderful story of a lot of innovations that have happened. But I would still think that with a lot of security issues coming to the fore, I would think that there is a lot that we can still do better. We have a national cybersecurity policy of 2013 that we are talking about coming up with a new one next month. But even if you look at 2013's national cybersecurity policy, I remember the day it was being released here by the former NSA, Mr. Menon. I was speaking at the Council of Foreign Relations in New York, where Mr. Jagdish Bhagwati had asked me, do you think anything will go from here in terms of this cooperation? Now, if you see in that, it was mentioned that about 5 lakh professionals would be required for cybersecurity in the country. Now, that figure remained as a figure. Private sectors have employed people at levels that possibly, they didn't help anywhere in terms of looking at people with actual work on innovation or taking this role. But policy implementation, even around the cybersecurity, hasn't been, I would think, commensurate to what we can do. We have to really think that all the issues around data localization, which becomes point of discussion between the two countries, even in the trade negotiations, this is an issue. But I would think that there are other areas very close to that that we can target. For example, attribution. Now, we all just saw about a couple of weeks back where the whole story around the WhatsApp was getting a lot of media attention. But at the end of the day, it is that whole one word, attribution. If you are not able to correctly attribute to a source of a particular cyber attack or malfeasance that happens, this kind of games will go on. You can blame him, her, etc. But so, doesn't attribution provide an opportunity for a large-scale ecosystem of innovations and understanding and conversations and again, tinkering that is possible? I would think that this problem has to be solved for cybersecurity to be really, trustworthy and believable by the community as such. And lastly, very interestingly, we talked on data. And if you remember in September when the Facebook's Nick Clegg was here, a very interesting conversation happened where is data oil or is data water? Now that conversation had gained a lot of public ground. Now, even if you consider data as oil, as Mr. Ambani had said, and the Facebook had said about data being water and not oil, because oil can be hoarded, I would still think that our track record, India's track record as far as data management has been concerned, has been very, very positive, good, to the point. All the service level agreements that the Indian companies sign with the US companies have been very well followed. So there is a certain level of trust that the Americans have to give us or the Indian companies to be able to take all the future data cooperation forward. My way or the highway around data localization possibly might not be the best approach. I think somewhere we'll have to find middle ground, and as Deepak rightly pointed out, some sorts of data, some data has to remain in this country. You know, it's well in our interest, even despite all the criticisms that which I don't agree to around Aadhaar, but it is still a system that is well protected, it is well conceived, the whole security system around is very well built, and there isn't a single case where any biometric data anywhere has been leaked, neither it can be. So whatever be the level of encryption, whatever be the encryption ecosystem that we have also worked on indigenously, we haven't done anything wrong. We have done a great job, and this is also so. Our own practices, our own track record itself is quite a well indicator and invitation to many of the American companies as well as the system to trust us on this data aspect, so that some bit of activity even on this aspect we can do within this country.
Thank you. I'd like to first thank Ambika and Pradeep for inviting me here. And you've got such a distinguished panel. I don't know what I can contribute on. But anyway, I'll attempt my best. A couple of points. I think the US-India relationship today is probably the best ever in the history of both the countries, in my opinion. Sadly, US has walked out of the Paris Accord yesterday. And I'm going to be talking on energy, on mainly renewable energy. So that's why I'm deeply concerned why this has happened. For India to succeed, and India to really succeed, for any country to succeed, if you do a global analysis, the energy costs in that particular country have been the lowest. That has led to huge amount of growth. In India, our energy costs remain amongst the highest in the world, even higher than Southeast Asian countries. This is because of an inefficient system, state governments giving free power to farmers and industry subsidizing for that, and of course our transmission and distribution losses in some states are as high as 40%. In Finland, the transmission and distribution losses are 1%. So there's a big opportunity for India and US to partner, both in innovation and to see how this can be rectified. Now, India, today we are all well aware that still 40 to 50% of the Indian population has either no access to electricity or intermittent access to electricity, which means the electricity 24/7 is not available. Can we all imagine that if every Indian had electricity 24/7, we cannot control the growth of this country, because whatever the previous speakers have spoken about, that all requires energy, whether it is running of a mobile phone or a computer or a defense. We cannot run without energy costs or without energy. What does India need? India needs $500 billion in debt and equity, which we don't have, to complete the current ambitious program by Honorable Prime Minister for renewable energy. This money just does not exist in India. It's not there. Therefore, what would make a big difference is the innovative funding, if I may call it innovative, which could be available from the US. US generates equity and debt, which can find its way into India and help India achieve its renewable energy targets and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. We cannot wish coal away, whether we like it or we don't like it, because that's a base load part 24/7, and that is where clean coal technology can come in from the US. That is something which country needs. Going forward, most of us do not even realize the fast pace of change which is happening in California in terms of electric cars and storage of energy. Storage of energy continues to be extremely expensive, but we believe in the next 5 years these costs will come down, because there is a lot of research going on going on in the US and China. And China actually is leading this way, both in artificial intelligence and battery technology. Huge capacities are coming up in China because they realize that energy security is most important. And I think for India as well, we need to be very conscious that energy security is the most critical thing for our country, and dependence on fossil fuel imports is it's not good for the country in the long run. Now, where has in renewable energy, where does US stand? Currently, in my opinion, nowhere, because the lead which is taking place, whether you look at solar in modules, it's coming from China. We need to, and I'm happy our former Secretary Dr. Arun Mairam is here, we need to do more to attract industry here. For example, First Solar, which is a US company, and I know them very well, I saw their plant in Malaysia in Penang. It is cheaper for them to put a plant outside India, send their modules here, than to manufacture in India. So there is a lot of thinking government has to do to actually make it attractive for foreign companies to come and invest and make India the base, not only for the huge market which exists in India, but make it a base for global exports. And there will never be a better time with India, with US-China relationships very low, with other economies like Thailand looking to go into recession, that we capitalize on this opportunity to actually put our policies in place so that we can attract more capital. I think India needs to think differently. We need to make laws which are conducive to our country, not copy-paste laws which make no sense. We were leaders in innovation 300 years, 1,000 years, or 2,000 years ago. We have lost that somewhere over the past 2,000 years of being ruled by overseas invaders. I think we need to realize the potential we have. We have Indians working, if you look at any renewable energy project which is taking place in Philippines or Indonesia, you have Indians working there. Because we understand this industry well. The growth which solar has had in India, no other country has had after China. It continues to be there, but I think we need to do a lot. Canadian pension funds are leading the way of investing in India. Billions of dollars are coming into solar and wind. In terms of INVITs, I think Dr. Mairam INVITs had started in your time. We are seeing a lot of traction there. And of course, the raw material which US has is money, which needs to flow into this country. And I think US needs to understand that when India has every Indian citizen has 24/7 power, it's an opportunity for US companies for growth as well. Because when you have electricity in a village, records will prove that the GDP of that village goes up. And there's more opportunity, then you will, whether it is travel or whether it is import of other goods or highways being built. I mean, there's so much can be done because this country has an insatiable appetite for growth. And I think there is no other country, if you look at the mobile phones, highest number of mobile phones, high number of data usage in the world, is phenomenal. So I will pause here. I think that is what the two countries need to do. We need to do more. I don't think enough is being done by the US. And the really US companies need to come forward, open up the technology, especially in fossil fuels, which India needs desperately to have a base load power, and in battery technology, which is going to be the future for storage. Thank you.
I think there is a lot of scope for Indo-US cooperation in Africa in particular, and I'll come to this point later on in my concluding remarks. I would like to highlight three things about the United States. And these are assets for United States, and I don't think there is any other country in the world who has this kind of assets. First is law-governed democracy, and that leads to admiration. There are a lot of countries which admire United States for this particular aspect, law-governed democracy. Second is free market economy. Whether whatever we talk about, this restriction, that restriction, overall there is free market economy in the United States. And that leads to dynamism in your economy. And third is economically powerful allies, and that gives you strength. I think taken together, that creates this innovative or innovation ecosystem in your country. And I think there is a lot of scope. We discussed a number of areas where United States and India can work together. And I would like to highlight just one or two areas. One is that in the context of this intellectual property rights, there is a lot of scope, I think, for Indian small and medium enterprises and American small and medium enterprises to work together to come out with solutions of various challenges which we are talking about. And we should explore the scope for joint IPRs, particularly in areas like industrial design, not just on patents, but also on industrial design and things like that. My second point is about, I'm very glad to know about this Atal Innovation Mission and the kind of ecosystem which it is developing. And my point is that the real changes which are happening in India, they are not happening in cities like Delhi or Mumbai. They are happening in our villages and small towns. So if we keep restricting ourselves to this Lutyens Delhi in particular, I don't think we are going to go forward much. Because here we keep discussing, we discuss until death. These are the areas where also we cannot just think about or just do it kind of approach, but we have to have a balance to see that how we can take our ideas forward. So I'll be very interested, and this is something which we need to discuss with Niti Aayog, that to know more about these schools, what kind of schools they are, which are part of this system or the ecosystem which Atal Innovation Mission is developing. In this context, let me also highlight that one policy measure which Government of Andhra Pradesh has recently taken. They have introduced English language education from class 1. I think that is the need of the hour. I mean, we should not leave the responsibility of preserving. I'm not at all against our indigenous languages. We should not just leave the responsibility of preserving our indigenous languages to Dalits and other backward communities and keep sending our own children to English medium schools. Right? So that's not good. This is real India, the new India. This thinking is different. Now coming to my final point in the Indo-Pacific context, I have read again and again the Indo-Pacific strategy of the United States. And I don't think that it is a bulwark against any country. It talks about certain values, open, transparent system, for example, freedom of navigation. Now, if certain countries cannot adhere to those values, what do we do? So we have our foreign policy is very, very clear, as Mr. Mehta has also underlined. We have multipolarity. But I think there is a lot of scope for India and United States to work together in the Indo-Pacific space, along with countries like Japan, Australia, Indonesia, Singapore, and many other countries who have better understanding of the values, democratic values in particular, which we are talking about. So with that, let me come to an end, and I think the point that Peter, our colleague and friend from Africa, raised, if we are really interested in the development of Africa and such economies, I think there is a lot of scope for Indo-US cooperation. Some activities are already going on, which we know in Africa, because if we look at Indian thinking about the Indo-Pacific construct or compact, the east coast of Africa is also included in our thinking. So, if we can come to a middle ground about the US thinking and Indian thinking in the Indo-Pacific, I see that a lot of areas where there is scope for cooperation between India and United States in Africa and many other regions of the world. Now, so with that, let me come to a conclusion, and we are all very happy to collaborate with USIBC for organizing this program. I think this is just a beginning. We are coming out, we have this program in Washington DC and we have this program in New Delhi. So we are going to come out with a work program on areas where India and United States can collaborate through innovations in specific areas, not just in India or in the United States, but also in the overall Indo-Pacific region, including east coast of Africa in particular, that's for sure. Let me also thank my colleagues who have been working on this area, and also the panelists for your thoughts, for sharing your thoughts. I thought that Vimal will also talk about a little bit on the education and how we can collaborate in the field of education, particularly through use of new technologies. So, as I said, this is just a beginning, and we need to first understand the ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, much more clearly. And I think that ecosystem is emerging in our villages and in our small towns, not just in big cities like Delhi. Thank you very much.